Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon to all, and thanks for joining in for our webinar today on the future of EdTech. I'm Anil, Senior Partner and Founder, CEO of RedSeer. For those of you who might not be heard of RedSeer, here's a quick background of us, the work we do. RedSeer is a leader in the internet and new age advisory space. Over the last 11 years of operations, we have advised more than 200 clients across the breadth of the internet and investment industry in India, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. With over 300 employees, RedSeer has emerged as the largest homegrown consulting firm in India. For this event, we partnered with IMAI and AWS as a knowledge partner, and we are delighted to share with you some key findings from study on digitization of the education ecosystem in India. This report has been made by the support of multiple stakeholders, government bodies, Niti Aayog, NSDC, hundreds of the schools and colleges who we have interviewed over the last few weeks, and the support of IMI and AWS team. We wholly thank all for their support and participation in bringing this report. So before we proceed on some of the specific findings of the study and engage in the discussion, there are some of the key areas for the context setting. NEP 2020 marks a landmark shift in education policy and sets the sails for digital transformation of education in India. Focus on digital holistic learning, multidisciplinary offerings, and multilingual multitude of things will clearly greatly uplift the quality of education and learning outcomes. Setting up of National Research Foundation, National Education Technology Forum, National Professional Standards for Teachers provides necessary policy push to spearhead into the next era for delivering education. COVID-19, the catalyst for technology adoption. Despite low readiness, both schools and colleges showed agility in responding to the lockdown and adopting the various technologies to ensure that teaching continuity is maintained. While more mature schools and colleges, particularly serving to mid-high income group segments, moved to live online classes, the masses found savor in WhatsApp as tech-based communication medium. So some of the key findings which came out or recommendations which came out from the report have been around the seven big pillars, which as we call it for the report. The first one is about sustain and build on technology adoption after COVID. The second theme which came out from the report is how can we create products which are teacher-centric? So teachers are able to use it in an agile fashion. The third theme which came out of the report has been about how can we provide vernacular language and multi-device support to the wider population of students across India. The fourth outcome is focus on delivering learning outcomes rather than going by the marks, which is something which has come out from the NEP policy as well. Device and digital content to increase accessibility and affordability. How can students and parents across the various demographic cuts can have access to the device and digital content? Cloud infrastructure to enable technology which delivers at scale in a secure manner, which is something which sits behind the screen but is fairly important on giving a seamless outcome to the larger student population across the Indian geography. And finally, important ones is about skill upgradation. How do we ensure that the technological aptitude and readiness of the ecosystem is upgraded and ecosystem is ready to adopt the change on the digital beat side. So those are some of the big messages which came out from the reports and recommendations which came out from the report. I think with that, if I just sort of go back to some of the previous work which you have done on the on the education system and the kind of impact which digital have had on it, we see out of 270 million students which are there in India, around about 150 million students have access to internet and of course to the digital devices in one form or other, right? There's about 45 to 50% of the students and teachers and parents who do not have access to any kind of internet and digital device access. Now that's sort of creating a significant digital divide in Indian education system, where one set of students and parents are, of course, are able to write to this new digital wave of education versus the others which are being deprived of it. With the government's multiple initiatives, which I spoke about, and the new NEP policy, the government is, of course, trying to do a lot to bridge this digital gap. And today we have an esteemed panel with us. And what I'll do is maybe try to pick the brain of some of the smartest minds in India when it comes to education, to understand how are we trying to tackle this problem. Maybe I'll just start with Mr. Ramanan. If you could just speak about this digital divide and how is really government and the various government policies working on it.
Yeah, thank you, Anil, and good afternoon to everybody who's logged onto the call. I hope everyone is safe and healthy in spite of these very difficult COVID-19 circumstances, and all of you are also practicing the necessary safeguards advocated by your institutions or the health authorities or the government. It's a very good question that you have asked, and it is very central to the deliberation that we'll be having over the next half an hour, I guess. And that is, we have what they call as a demographic dividend, which is the envy of many a country. We have more than 1.4 million schools. We have 10,500 engineering and related institutions. We have 39,000 colleges. And you pointed out 217 million students who are going to be entering into the workplace over the next 5 to 10 years. We are also 1.3 billion people. And there are 600,000 villages in our country. There are more than 8,000 towns and small cities. And we have only 8 tier 1 cities. And when we talk about digital divide, the question is, yes, digital education is going to be a must. It's going to be a way going forward. COVID-19 has starkly revealed the challenges that one would have in the form of a pandemic here or climate change issue that may happen sometime in the future. How do you ensure that in spite of all these challenges of lockdowns and disruption in supply chains and disruption in travel and other lives and livelihoods, we are able to, and as India, rise up to the challenge of educating our masses and making sure that they become not only just job seekers, but job creators in this country. And so the educational system that we are talking about has to undergo a revolutionary change in terms of what we need to do and how we need to approach it. The Honorable Prime Minister, in his clarion call for Atmanirbhar Bharat, rightfully identified 5 pillars which we need to look at if we want to make this entire Atmanirbhar Bharat a reality. And Atmanirbhar Bharat is all about self-reliance, not only for the country, but at the individual level or at a district level, state level, societal level, or at a national level. And if you want to achieve that, we need a high level of education in the masses. We also need high level of innovation, entrepreneurship, and we need to make sure that everybody has access to it, from the remotest parts of our country to the tier 1, tier 2 cities. We have had tremendous growth in our mobile communication systems, availability of mobile phones, smartphones, availability of the internet, but there is still a whole lot of challenges because we have 715 districts, out of which 115 are aspirational districts, which are still at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of access to healthcare, access to education, access to affordable housing, access to clean drinking water and sanitation, and access to basic waste management. So when you have this sort of divide between the haves and the have-not, the second pillar, which the Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister identified, which is the pillar of infrastructure. How do we address the pillar of infrastructure, not only the digital infrastructure that is required, but also the physical infrastructure that needs to be set up so that we are able to bridge this gap, the gap between the haves and the have-not, the gap in access. And so it is very important for us to leverage the third pillar, which he talks about, and that is the pillar of technology. The pillar of technology is what is going to drive this addressing of this gap. because technology has become affordable, accessible, available, and advanced. And you have the latest of technologies like 3D printers, robotics, IoT, miniaturized electronics, or augmented virtual reality, all making their advent into the workplace, and upon which new solutions are being developed. And therefore, the acquisition of these skills is of paramount importance, and the leveraging of technology to be able to address the gaps in infrastructure and to address the demographic dividend, who have to be educated and be converted into problem solvers rather than just rote learners, that becomes a very important part of the equation of the solution. And then you have two other pillars that he talked about, which is very important, the pillar of demand. And the pillar of demand with 1.3 billion people actually gives us the opportunity to create a huge number of entrepreneurs to fill the demand. It's not going to be enough for us to be able to depend upon the current job seekers or the current companies who are catering to jobs to be good enough to fulfill the demand that is latent in our country. We don't need to look elsewhere for the demand. Many other countries are flocking to India to fulfill the demand. And if we raise the level of education, innovation, entrepreneurship, skill development in our country to another level, leveraging digital technology as well as looking at the physical infrastructure that needs to be built, that combination is going to ensure that we will be in a position to fulfill the demand. And finally, he talked about the pillar of socio-economic growth, because it is not enough for us to have just 250 million people who are in the middle class and who are rising, and therefore the capability of spending and therefore the capability of growth, economic growth, continues to rise. But how do we also ensure that the 22% who are still below the poverty line, or the 44% who are agri-economy based, how do we bring them into the fold of having all the innovation that is needed in order to address their problems? Agri innovation, biotech innovation, healthcare innovation, waste management innovation, drinking water and sanitation innovation. How do we ensure that we build thousands of community innovation centers and thousands of centers of job creation in the country, rather than have just 8 tier 1 cities trying to fulfill the demand? Now, when you look at all of this, the socio-economic part, and that is having social innovations as importantly regarded as commercially driven innovations, is very important, because unless you have this balance and unless you bridge this economic divide and the digital divide, you will have not addressed the problems of the country. But then, since we are, the new education policy has been rolled out, and it is a game changer in terms of the way it is viewing the India of the future. It is looking at the 5 important aspects which are critical success factors. How do you provide access to high quality education? How do you ensure equity and affordability in the education? Because that is as important as anything else. How do you also ensure quality in the education in terms of standardization, where digital techniques and digital tools can empower as well as standardize in the way education is being imparted, not only to the students, but also to the teachers? And finally, how do you bring in accountability by ensuring that there are monitoring, measurement, and review systems, leveraging technology, leveraging digital technology, which makes it easier for us to know where the gaps are and how to address the gaps. So with that, I'll stop at this point in time. But these are the various things that really come out because of the new educational policy that the government is rolling out, and the importance of vocational skills as much as higher educational skills. In a matter of speaking, we have neglected vocational skills as something, or relegated it to a lower level. How do we bring it up to a higher level, as in advanced economies, as in Germany or in the United States, where vocational skills are considered as important, and they also give you a platform for moving into getting a degree or even a PhD in a university, and it is not considered as something which is which is a lower level skill. So these are the very important factors which are addressable through the new education policy, and we have a unique opportunity in our country to be able to leapfrog as a very innovative nation, driving education technology or digital technology as a means of education for the rest of the country.
Thank you, Mr. Ramanan, for such a insightful thoughts on the digital. May I move to Mr. Venkatesh, and would be helpful to get your views on what are the ways in which we can really fill in this digital divide, and how is government's initiatives helping us?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, and also Good afternoon to each and every audience who is on connected to us through this platform today. I think first and foremost, I think Mr. Ramanan touched upon the foundations in terms of how big is our country, the diversified ecosystem, and the national education policy. He also emphasized the importance of vocational education. In fact, at National Skill Development Corporation, that's one of the key areas we work on. On July 15th, where we celebrate it as in World Youth Skill Day, the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji touched upon the importance of upskilling and reskilling. And I somehow see that relevance extremely important even in the school education or in the college ecosystem right now. But for me, one of the key challenges I see shaping up to the national education policy, not only challenge and opportunity, is also to upskill and reskill some of our teachers and faculty in the ecosystem. When I say upskill and reskill, mostly in terms of usage of technology, providing the relevant technology platforms for them to scale. If you look into the current statistics of the Indian ecosystem, 15 to 20% of the school ecosystem, I'm talking about the 1.5 million school ecosystem, has access to computers, vis-a-vis an 80 to 85% in the higher education space. And it requires a lot of emphasis, especially in the K-12 education space, to bring in relevant platforms, products, both from scaling and helping them to migrate into it, from a cloud infrastructure standpoint, or building LMSs to monitor, track, and look at the performance of the profile of the people who are logging in to complete those courses, students and all. But also at the same time, building in products to train the teachers in usage of technology. That's extremely important. In fact, at NSDC, what we are looking into is a public-private partnership of bringing in relevant people from the private sectors, from and entities that could be from startups to SMEs to micro SMEs to large enterprises to even MNCs to partner with us, so as to solve this large problem which we have in a diverse country. So at NSDC, we have our Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendras, PMKK centers of excellence. These are the skilling centers of excellence established in almost every district. And we have a wide presence. So we have a large training ecosystem. We have close to 20,000 plus training centers, and we have close to 700 plus very good quality trainers and training ecosystem partners. So with this entire ecosystem, we skill roughly around a 5 million kind of a population, out of which 2.5 million are the PMKVY scheme-based programs, and 2.5 are the non-scheme-based programs every year. The opportunity here now we look into as we progress towards the next 4 years, 5 years time frame, is also to build on competencies from a digital standpoint and be an aggregator, bring some ecosystem together to create knowledge partners and networks across the ecosystem. As part of that, in fact, we initiated something called eSkill India. It's going to be a one-stop portal for anything to do with skilling. So, we're actively engaged with many organizations, not only in India, even outside India, to partner with us, to be part of the journey in impacting this large ecosystem. In fact, I'm happy to share, if you talk about any organization, whether it is a Google, whether it is an AWS, whether it's a Microsoft, whether it's a LinkedIn, we are trying to partner with each one of them, bringing in the best of everyone. Because, I don't think one organization or in one company or in one ecosystem will be able to solve this. Multiple synergies have to be established across various partners, not only even from the advanced and well-to-do large organizations, even from micro SMEs, as well as even startups coming together. Because as Ramanan expressed, India is a very diverse and it's a very large country. We have a large population. We have a demographic advantage of being the youngest nation, but we need to ensure that the skilling is done, the skills are imparted, the school education, the higher education shapes up and actually moves in synergy with the national education policy. These are very, very important to be thought through in the next 5 to 10 years time frame. So I would like to, for example, share that some of our interesting startups which are onboarded, especially during the COVID times when physical structures were under lockdown, we initiated immediately getting onto the online mode and also enabling our teachers, enabling our trainers in our ecosystem and our training partner centers to adopt to these online methodologies. Very interestingly, we have some startups like Imparters or an Upgrade and, or a Simply Learn. A lot of people have come together in terms of bringing in the richness, bringing in the content technology, then tools, relevant online platforms, and then we started integrating. In fact, last week we announced a partnership with LinkedIn, wherein LinkedIn has launched LinkedIn Coaches and LinkedIn Learning platform. So we actually brought that ecosystem, and we are impacting a larger ecosystem of India by integrating with LinkedIn and offering those things to the larger skill ecosystem. Similarly, I see a huge opportunity. In fact, we're also in talks with Baiju Ravindran from Baiju, to see how we can drive digital training, which can be imparted to the teachers in rural places where they don't have access to digital content. So we are trying to do that experiment, especially with the K-12 ecosystem, in terms of exploring opportunities to partner with them and further create content for school teachers so that we can train school teachers. Training school teachers is a very important exercise. Even Google, as part of Sundar Pichai's commitment to India, they have committed that they'll be touching upon, the government schools and giving them access to technology, giving them right tools to the technology. Similarly, AWS, we are working with AWS in terms of identifying AWS Educate and AWS community to come forward to support in terms of building in the right technology platform content to schools and colleges. So I think it's a collaborative way. All the organizations in India have to come together to address this large change. And in this process, whether it is Niti Aayog or NSDC, we all are open to look at potential partnerships and explore institutional synergies.
Thank you, Venkatesh. I think that's a very good insights around the upskilling of teachers, which we've identified as one of the big levers for success of promoting the digital wave of education in the Indian market. Speaking about collaboration and technology collaboration, I would just move to Sunil. When we think of education, of course, some of these front-end companies like we have Upgrade, LinkedIn, Simply Learn, and Byju's. We of course get access to a lot of those platforms and have understanding about that. Now, going back to cloud, which is sitting behind a lot of these platforms and is really helping the digital education go to these smaller towns. How is really cloud a big game changer in this digital education ecosystem? What are the kind of challenges which you are facing, and what kind of direct and indirect wins which you've been able to arrive, Sunil? Maybe if you can give some comments around that.
Sure thing. Thank you very much, Anil. Hi, Ramanan sir, and hi, Venkatesh. Good seeing you all, actually. And I think the introduction given by Ramanan is fantastic because he covered everything possible. So I'm going to pick on a couple of things that I think that we can talk about. Okay, so one, from the NEP perspective, I was in a panel discussion yesterday and the conversation popped around NEP again. And somebody said that NEP is 95% best policy for India, and it's like much weighted policy so far. It's a good thing, okay? And somebody made a comment that all the building blocks for making that happen exists and already existed, and the pandemic primarily has pushed that into a faster way of adoption, which was something that has been holding them back, okay? So from a proof of concept perspective, this last 8 months has been very difficult for many of the educationists to try and sustain and continue education. But we've seen some interesting things that have happened, right? So in March, when the first shutdown happened, we offered, using one of our partner solutions, a virtual classroom solution for schools to continue education. And in 8 weeks' time, 1 million students were on the platform. Okay, and you can't get that kind of skill anywhere else. Okay, and that was the learning that we said, okay, fine, if that's the kind of demand that customers have today, because they're very, very adaptable, and because we have this size, we can actually show these things actually working. And the cloud is behind that, powering this entire scale adoption securely for close to about 400 schools that came on board and started adopting a live classroom platform. So what we have today is all the building blocks required for us to drive technology adoption, drive vocational plus academic engagement. The NEP recommends so strongly. All those blocks exist. Okay, and the current scenario that we're going through right now is ensure that most institutions have been gently forced to try it out, and they were resistant to trying technology. And now we have everyone trying virtual learning, virtual classrooms. Virtual assessments now has become a de facto offering. So we're seeing that surge happening. So most of the technology providers who largely use AWS globally is something that we see has been benefiting a lot because they're able to offer these solutions at a much faster pace because they've been building it for the last couple of years. And if you look at it today, we are saying that we have 4.4 million students, people using online platform on a daily basis. Highest daily usage in the world is in India. Okay, which means that there is a whole bunch of people that are now trying to use the online platforms to either enhance learning, continue learning, or add skills to it. Okay, so this is going to build a couple of interesting things. Okay, one of the points that Ramanan mentioned was that around trying to create a builder or a problem solver mindset. Okay, and we've been talking about it again and again, saying how do you drive this concept of a builder mindset where students are trying to inculcate habits to try and build solutions for the problems in the market. So whatever we do in the market today, whether it's through our programs like EDUTECH or RedSeer, we're trying to drive as much of builder mindset in the market so that they can build solutions for the Indian market and see what we can do. And we've seen these amazing amount of work. For example, the tinkering labs, I think is a great idea. And I'm a big fan of the tinkering labs. And we're looking at ways to make that work with AWS. Okay. And I just feel those are great places to get that K-12 ecosystem to help children start thinking about creating things. Okay, and become builders for solutions, which is a critical component skill that I think is important for us to bring in. So we are working with them. In fact, all the people that you mentioned, whether any of the customers you mentioned, all of them use AWS as the cloud provider, and because of which they have the flexibility to scale exponentially as and when required. And if you look at it, one single edtech acquired 26 million students in the last 2 months. Okay, so that kind of number of scale happens only because you have a very elastic, scalable cloud environment behind you that's guaranteeing an infrastructure that's really, really powerfully ready for you to take any scale you want. And that's what we're seeing. So this is happening across tier 1, tier 2 cities. We're seeing the same kind of requests coming into tier 3 cities where we have startups that are going and solving for teaching and learning requirements at that level. And I think that's going to be a key element. And the fact that technology is being called out as one of the elements or pillars of NEP is a critical component, because that's going to drive access, provide access to students at every level. And we can get the entire society to try and move forward much faster way because of that. I think that's primarily where the opportunity for us really is. Back to you, Anil.
I think that's very helpful. And I know Mr. Ramanan has to leave a bit early, so maybe the next one I'll direct at him. So, Mr. Ramanan, one of the findings which is coming out from this report is around the importance of vernacular, and how vernacular as a theme is important for digital wave to really go across the various smaller cities and across the Indian geography. What is your observation on that? Since when we think of technology, primarily a lot of it is in English, how do we break the barrier of that and put it across to the larger population?
Yeah. Thanks, Anil. I think it's a very important question, and it's something that is more unique to our nation here as compared to many other nations, because everywhere else, even if they have some multiple languages, they have somewhere standardized upon a particular language or a set of languages. Whereas in India, it's really a big issue. But that's where I think we have technology and digital technology to come in and help, because that's going to be a great force to reckon with in terms of the impact it can have in addressing this particular problem. I'd like to just share a couple of things. One, Sunil mentioned about Atal Tinkering Labs, and I had not mentioned it earlier, but the Atal Innovation Mission has launched several thousands of Atal Tinkering Labs across the country. And one very important thing that we took to the masses was, how do we ensure that Atal Tinkering Labs, which are technology intensive labs, 3D printing, robotics, IoT, miniaturized electronics, or augmented virtual reality, do-it-yourself kits. These are given to the young students so that they can play with them, tinker with them, and create solutions for problems they see in and around the community. And we took a very conscious decision. There are 715 districts in our country. Every district should have an Atal Tinkering Lab or multiple Atal Tinkering Labs. And the vision of Atal Innovation Mission is, how do we ensure that every school has access to an Atal Tinkering Lab if they don't have an Atal Tinkering Lab also. Even if they don't have one, they should have access to one. So that's where we have today now 14,000 schools selected across the country and across all the 715 districts. And in most of the other districts, other than the tier 1 districts, actually the innovation happens in the local languages. The students operate in the local languages. We encourage them. We said we run what is known as a tinkering marathon every year. And this tinkering marathon, we just give challenges. We say, can you identify problems that you see in and around the community in these 8 different areas? Healthcare, smart mobility, water management, electricity management, and so on. So at a very broad level, we give them the challenges and then say, you identify the problems and you identify a solution. So we want to stimulate in them the problem identification capability and the problem solving capability. And 70% of the schools actually respond with the actual prototype of the innovation and a description and a presentation in their local languages. And we judge them based upon that local content. And we were very particular. We said, don't try to express your innovation in English. Express it in your mother tongue or the language which you feel most comfortable with. And you know, the beauty of innovation and skill learning and problem solving is that whatever language you speak in, that innovation becomes self-evident because of what the ease with which the person is communicating, as well as what you're able to see. So out of the 70% of our Atal Tinkering Labs are government-aided schools in tier 2, tier 3 districts and rural India. 70% are girls and co-ed schools. And in the last tinkering marathon, this is another observation that I wanted to make, which I forgot to make earlier, is this gender disparity that we talk about, you know, in terms of education and the impact girls can have and women can have on the entrepreneurial innovative ecosystem in India. It is absolutely mind-boggling. 45% of the Atal Tinkering Marathon winners were girl students. And when we actually looked at it a little more closely, and we found it wasn't surprising in a manner of speaking, because girls are detail-oriented. They're very, they communicate extraordinarily well as compared to the boys. They are not shy of asking for help or voicing their problems and questions. They are multitasking by nature. So when you put all of this together, it's not very surprising that girl students can become a lot as innovative, if not more innovative than the boy students. And when we talk of 45% girl student winners, it is even more admirable because we have less than 40% enrollment of girl students in the schools. So now, when we bring all of this, the multilingual part, technology can play a big role in addressing many of these problems, not only from the point of view of communication, but in terms of the teaching itself. And secondly, you are able to now, you know, with Amazon and all, you know, the Alexas and all of that in the world. In fact, I was just, before this, I was on a jury call where AI can be used in teaching. And some of the innovations I saw are absolutely wonderful in terms of how AI is addressing the language issue and how it is also addressing the reach issue or the segmentation issue, because the segmentation is important. How do you use AI for differently able children? How do you use it for being able to teach better and more effectively, and thus get the best out of them? So I think technology is going to play a huge role. The other thing that I want to emphasize is the importance of private sector, public sector partnership in this entire exercise, and that is what the NEP has also focused on quite well. It is encouraging multiple stakeholders into the system. It is also enabling and incentivizing, and we have to do a little more stuff on that. We should incentivize private sector to play a role, not just through CSR. CSR is one way of contributing, but the corporates, I mean, you look at today, Atal Innovation Mission, we have 25 to 30 partners, and we have been also discussing with Amazon. So Sunil, I'm sure I'll be closing it with you quickly. But we have a number of corporate partners, and that really brings the value into the education, because they're going to be the ultimate recipients of these innovative young students who are coming out there from the graduating from our universities and who are going to take the country forward and companies forward. So I think this public sector, private sector partnership should become very strong. And that can also become a mechanism of addressing this digital divide we are talking about, because we are setting up, for example, in Atal Innovation Mission, we are setting up incubators and community innovation centers in tier 2, tier 3 cities and rural India. And we need thousands of community innovation centers, which become hubs of innovation and job creation. You know, skill development, innovation, and job creation, all three things. And these community innovation centers are not necessarily incubation centers, but they become the places where you are able to implement innovations relevant to the local community needs. For example, if you're in Goa, how do you create community innovation centers focusing on tourism or cashew nut, farming development or shipbuilding or fishing industry or the mining industry? These are relevant to Goa. You don't bring something else which is not relevant to Goa, but then you are now creating the ecosystem for local job creation and innovation. So I think technology can become a great enabler in being able to address not only the language problem, but the needs of local communities, as well as bridging the disparity that exists for the differently able, the economically disadvantaged, as well as the lack of infrastructure, which sometimes exists, and where digital infrastructure can fill the gap.
Thank you, Mr. Ramanan. Really heartening to see some of these numbers starting from the number of Atal tinkering labs, which we have across 715 districts, 45% winners being girls. I think that's really very, very heartening. I think I'll just move to Mr. Venkatesh on the next question, which is sort of connected to what really Mr. Ramanan really spoke about. How do we switch from the rod-based learning to the outcome-based learning? And when you speak about higher education, I think the question is still relatively more simpler, because we know that we are one step behind getting and starting a career. But when it comes to K-12, the next step for most of us, most of the students, is just to get to college. And that still is not a real application of skill sets into the jobs. So, and this is one of the findings which came out from the report, that how do we really move from the rod-based learning to delivering learning-based outcomes? What has been your experience, Mr. Venkatesh, working in this medium?
I think, overall as a country, we need to, even at K-12 or higher education, we need to set the right outcome-based learning approach, and that's very important. The problem with the Indian ecosystem is that most of it is driven towards everybody's aiming only to get a job. In this process, the real quality time of acquiring a particular skill, whether it is coding, whether it is any of the skills you want to acquire, is something which is not focused upon. And also, if you look into the even Indian IT ecosystem, in the Indian ecosystem of IT and software engineers, there's a lot of reskilling which is happening even in the larger organizations. If you look into Infi, Wipro, TCS, HCL, Cognizant, TechEms, all of them are actually reskilling their talent. And when the reskilling is happening at that level, imagine what is required in a school level, where the curriculum updates are not up to the mark. And of course, a lot of work has to be done. Now, coming back to it, are we optimistic? Are we pessimistic about this? I will say, we should be optimistic, because the new education policy really touches upon this. In fact, I'm happy to see that coding is introduced from class 6th. That's a very big move, because that will change the mindset of the students, and that makes them more application oriented, focused on outcome orientation. Because this will also drive the adoption of usage of computers in schools, which is right now as a percentage, even as your report talks about, it is around 15 to 20% in the schools, and this requires an implementation of devices, and also the policymakers will also have opportunity to work around bringing in interesting devices and connected devices to that ecosystem. One of the things Indian schooling education, and overall, if I look into the next 5 to 10 years, it would be a gig economy ruling, and it is multi-skilling that will really help students, find opportunities. So, even in large organizations worldwide, we are seeing that skills are becoming more important than even qualifications. And maybe next to 5 to 10 years down the line, people will be hired based on the skill they have. Whatever skill, whether it's coding skill or deep NLP or an AI, if it is in the higher education space, or a web designing or a web development or an UX or a UI or a digital marketing, any skill for that matter, you'll be more valued for the skill. And it is not necessary that the individual just focuses on one career. There's an opportunity in the gig economy to be a freelancer, and that's a wave which is going to take up in the next 5 to 10 years. And people may not be doing one job at one time, and maybe they'll be doing multiple jobs at multiple time. And there's a very nice research review I was reading at one of the authors of Harvard. It says that in way back in 1990s and 2000s, when you have to buy an cassette which has 7-8 collection of songs, and you may not like 5 songs, but you like 2 songs, but you need to pay for the entire stuff. And then can CDs, again, you have a choice of selection. But look at the way Apple has completely changed the ecosystem. With Apple iTunes into the ecosystem, you only pay for what you want. And I think even the organizations, as they go forward, they can't be hiring people and just confine them to one particular role, one particular organization. You need to sit in office from 9 to 11 or 9 to 12 or 9 to 6, depending on time zones. It's an interconnected, interoperable, anytime, anywhere access, and people are experimenting that in the COVID time. So, this kind of an opportunity gives a fantastic leverage for the gig economy. That means they can do multiple jobs. They need not work with one organization. They change their mindset from being a job seeker to a job creator. And that mindset change is very much important. One of the things I see as an advantage of Atal Tinkering Labs or Atal Innovation Labs in colleges is people start thinking of a different wave, a different, different opportunity for them. It is not just about getting a job, but how can I create? How can I can be an innovator? How can I create a job for others? That mindset is very much important. I think that thing will slowly take on, and you will see more of the younger generation now focusing on starting things of their own, which we already see. For example, India has almost 4,800 EdTech startups. I don't say all of them may succeed. Maybe 10% of them may succeed, but look at it when you look back 10 years back, to a current situation right now. People are getting inspired. They are doing new things. And this education system, with the new education policy, what we launched, I think curriculum, fixing of the curriculum, giving flexibility to people to do what they want, rather than just doing those set of courses to complete a degree. I think that will slowly get shaped off, and then you will see a new evolution of, flexible, modular learning, where content becomes accessible to everyone, and the dependency is on you to pick up the right thing so that you can invest on your right way of learning. And government giving that flexibility, I think it's going to be a great time for the next 5 to 10 years. Of course, the HR and the organizations have to change in terms of how they hire. They need to hire more on skills rather than degrees. That's very much important, because right now, any of the jobs says either you are an IIT, IIM, FMS, or top tier. That has to go. I call it, that's called more like a racism. Opportunity should be given to everyone, irrespective of which college you come from. And opportunity should be at the bottom of pyramid in terms of identifying and finding the capabilities from a skill point of view. Whether you have the skill, you get the job. Don't worry about what qualification. I think that's how I see the next 10 years to be.
Thank you, Mr. Venkatesh. I think all these are very, very powerful inputs from you, Mr. Venkatesh. I'll just maybe quickly move to Sunil, and I have maybe twofold questions. One coming from all what we heard between Mr. Ramanan and Mr. Venkatesh, right? So we're speaking about the importance of vernacular and learning-based outcomes. Now, I mean, as an employer, if you look at AWS, right? So people who are trained in vernac, they are not great in English, but really solving for a practical problem. What is the kind of a roadmap of or growth or even an entry which they can have with an employer like AWS? Is that something which they can really aspire for, or do you think that's a problem which cannot be solved in now or 5 years or 10 years? I mean, sorry to put you on the spot, but just trying to ask a very, very practical question.
So I'm going to answer this question slightly differently. Okay. So the kind of hiring that Amazon does is a broad spectrum. So Amazon has a very large ecosystem of people that primarily service customers either on the online platform or AWS, and the skill sets are very different. And that range can go across multilingual. There really is no problem at all. So we have a lot of people that are working there. I'm going to take this slightly differently and pivot the discussion around something that Venkatesh just mentioned, that customers are realizing around how they can actually use and pay for only what they consume, okay, which is fundamentally how AWS works. So many of the institutions in the country today are realizing that they can create virtual lab environments for students to go and try out and work on practical environments without actually spending on buying large hardware. Okay, so virtualized lab environments are becoming acceptable, which was not the case earlier. Okay, and this learning primarily allows institution customers to actually look at prioritizing their spends rather than investing in a large lab. Can you actually use labs and you use and consume only what you really require and not keep labs running throughout the year. This is kind of becoming really interesting because cloud labs are becoming a de facto option, and kids are actually getting access, students are getting access to a whole bunch of tools virtually, and this is helping them really a lot. So that's one that I see is happening. So the pay as you go mindset or the gig economy fundamentally relies on the fact that you only pay for what you consume, and that's primarily what the cloud model really is all about. And that's kind of what we're talking to customers about. So what we're seeing now, if you look at it over the last 8 months, is that many of the institutions that were reluctant to adopt technology suddenly adopting a whole bunch of new technology, and they're seeing the benefits of it, which means that the lab needn't have to be open 24/7 or can be open 24/7 without having expensive hardware. You can have it on the cloud virtually. That's possible today. They're able to run virtual exams. I'm talking about really large scale exams without moving from where they are, and students are able to do it virtually. So proctored examinations are happening. AI-driven proctored examination on AWS is possible. So we have partners doing that. Okay, we're also seeing a whole bunch of startups that are working around the space of linguistics. Okay, where they're helping students in tier 2 and tier 3 cities have basic understanding of English using a mobile-based app. Okay, and that's kind of taken off in a big way. So English being an important link language of sorts is a useful tool for students when they're going in for interviews. So tier 3 cities students also can go in and handle interview in a tier 1 city, which is something that is a critical component for us to get that digital divide addressed. Okay, that's happening at scale. So all this collected together is creating an opportunity for the market, for startups in the country to actually look at education as a great opportunity for scale, because NEP provides a platform that's driving a lot of conversational technology and urban learning, which is a critical component for us to scale and reduce the digital divide. So that's where we are on this. Back to you, Anil.
Thank you, Sunil. And I think there are a bunch of questions coming from the attendees as well. I'll just probably pick one of them, and Mr. Ramanan, would be great if you could just take it up. This is, just a second. Okay, I think I'm not able to locate the question, but essentially, I think the question is broadly around while there are a lot of solutions which have come in from the private platforms, which are very expensive and only very few can afford, how can we democratize and bring down the cost of these online platforms? Of course, you spoke about some of it in your previous talk, but maybe a quick answer on that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. In fact, this is something that we are working on. There's going to be a lot of innovation that is required to address this. For example, satellite technology. How do you use satellite technology, which is today primarily one-way technology, but which has access across the entire nation? How do you make it interactive? How do you build up set-top boxes which will enable for instance, two-way communication between the teacher and the student, or a group of students who are sitting in a village classroom, and be able to access it, because TV is accessible, satellite is accessible. Secondly, 5G technologies are going to play a very important role. I think the rollout of 5G technology is going to make communication access much easier. Two-way communications would be possible, and the bandwidth in terms of content dispersion as well as accumulation will be huge. And the third is, I do think we will have to find unique solutions for the Indian marketplace. See, if you look at America and if you start saying, this is how they're using in the advanced economies, that's not going to work out in India. What we need is a form of a blended learning, and that blended learning is going to be a combination of internet, smartphone, digital technology, and classrooms which are enabled, where you are having students who are sitting down and still able to have the access to a quality teacher. Teachers are going to be a big factor. In fact, one of the things that we did in Atal Innovation Mission is we realized that the ATL in charges are not going to be immediately adept at the technologies we are talking about. So we introduced Mentors of Change, a nationwide mentoring network. And lo and behold, to my great surprise, we had more than 10,000 voluntary mentors agreeing to mentor students from all over the country. That's a huge number of professionals. We are talking about the people who registered. They're all in the working community. They're working in places like Amazon or TCS or Wipro and so on. They are teachers, faculty from universities. They are PhD students, final year students who said, we would like to spend our time volunteering. So it is this mass movement of mentoring where students who have been there, done that, have that knowledge, and are able to impart to the students through these blended learning mechanisms. We are introducing, for example, mobile tinkering labs now across the country, and mobile tinkering labs would just allow this just a van fitted with all the mobile tinkering technologies to go sit down in a particular community, have all the students come there, get practical exposure to the tools, and be able to address these problems. So I think these are some of the ways in which one has to address. And I'm sure technology is going to be still a great enabler in enabling this blended learning and unique learning to our Indian environment.
Sure.
And Anil, if I
Thank
can
you,
add
Mr.
a
Ramanan.
little bit there, Venkatesh here, the question specifically was how do we bring down the cost of the various courses available in the ecosystem? And that's where I think Amazon can do a great job of regulating this. If they can have a Republic Day sale and then Independence Day sale, they can throw out saying that, hey, this is a Teachers Day sale wherein 50% off on all the financial courses and maybe for 60% off, and bring in the courses from edX, Coursera, Simply Learn, aggregate all of them, bring down those price points, and that requires regulation in India. That's very important. There's no one single aggregator competitive space which can bring down. In fact, it's a very good business idea for many of those guys who can look into it, and Amazon can do a great job when they can do it with the commercial goods and the products. Of course, they can do it, because if you look into Netflix and let's say Amazon Prime, the Indian charge, the price points are much lower than the US price points. And for a student to spend 5,000, 10,000 on an Coursera or an edX or any of the MOOC platforms where he wants to take a certification, if you can bring in a large aggregator, bring in all these players together and start giving discounting to the students and let those price points can come down. I think it's a pretty much doable business model which can impact a lot of students. We need to regulate those price points and make it more competitive.
No, makes sense, Venkatesh. And in fact, I was about to ask the same question to you. And just an extension of that thought, in terms of the partnerships which you've been having with various education platforms, which you just spoke about, in terms of reskilling teachers and all, have you seen the other side of it as well, where some of these platforms have really come forward and said that they would subsidize the cost of education for the larger student population on the next 500 million? And have there been some of those developments as well?
Of course, yes. There's a lot of positive momentum from each of these organizations. The large ones, especially the big guys, whether it's Salesforce, Microsoft, Google, LinkedIn, AWS, and all of them are willing to contribute to this ecosystem. They're actually, the courses what we offer through NSDC and through a partnership almost cost nothing. It's free of cost, because we can, a person in Delhi, sitting in Delhi, for him, 500 and $1,000 means nothing. He can easily enroll into those programs. But if I look into the districts which are relatively at a lower earning capacities in terms of people's spending power is concerned, so we ensure that all our partnerships are free of, the content is offered free. Even the certifications are offered at a bare minimum cost or discounting costs. And in fact, some of those organizations have even partnered with us to offer certifications also free. For example, I'll share with you, from a pre-COVID to now, our eSkill India portal has seen 1,500% increase in the participation. The number of people who are enrollments are going up. And, not only in the technology side, for example, we partnered with English Score. It's a UK-based organization funded by the British Council, which is an English app promoting course. And we have seen Learning English is able to add help a lot of people in the blue collar space in terms of improvised, salaries. And for example, a driver or any of the, blue collar workforces, if they know English, gets paid little higher than the others who don't. So we partnered with English Score. Their certification cost was 700 rupees. We spoke to them about the COVID situation and the affordability within Indian ecosystem. They have in fact waived off that. And they said that the first 1 lakh certifications are free of cost along with content. And we have seen within the 2 months of launch, almost they have hit 40,000 certifications people have already taken. That means more people would have taken, but 40,000 have cleared. Similarly, with each of the large organizations, we have set number to go with. For example, with an Microsoft, we are looking at talking about skilling 2 lakh people. With an Amazon AWS, we may be talking about skilling a 5 lakh people. With the Salesforce, we are looking at a 5 lakh. So all of these, content, courses, certifications, industry is more than happy to come forward and support. I don't see a challenge there. It's about enabling that ecosystem and making sure what they have is reachable to the largest ecosystem, and the bottom of the pyramid has an access to it. We don't see a challenge there.
Great. Thank you, Venkatesh. And I know that we're running short of time already, but I have just one last question to Sunil, and maybe if you can just quickly talk about it in 30 seconds, 1 minute. It's about so some of the people have been really asking about what is your view on the data security and safety when it comes to the education through cloud?
Yeah, so before I go there, I just want to answer the first question you had, which is around access to low-cost content, right? The AWS Educate platform gives access to enough content for anyone to take fundamentals of cloud all the way to AI free of cost. So you have that available for you. Anybody in the country can actually go in and log on to AWS Educate and have access to this content if you're part of the academic system. Okay, that's on the part. Okay, with regard to the question around security, right? We've been in the business, and we are one of the creators of this platform. So there is enough experience over the years with millions of customers are daily using that platform right now. There are enough systems in place to ensure that we have an absolutely robust system when it comes to security. So if you look at the referenceable customers that we have across the world, right? Whether it's Netflix, whether it's Uber, okay, these are customers that rely on AWS to primarily provide that last minute connect to you. And that primarily is happening because there's a very secure infrastructure behind it that's supporting it. So that's really not really much of a topic there, but that's where it is right now.
Thank you, Sunil, for your views. Thanks, Venkatesh, for taking our time. It's been a really enriching discussion, very, very insightful. And I'll pass on to the host for the next steps on this. Thank you very much for being part of the discussion.
Thanks, Anil. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers, for such an enriching session. I would also like to take a moment to thank our partners, Zendesk, Amazon Web Services, Dell Technologies, PayPal, Eat Squared, and RedSeer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks. Take care.